All right, Stefan, in the length of a tweet or a tweet thread, what did we end up talking about today?
The three types of customer data and which ones you're supposed to value and as it related to both marketing and product. And I feel like, that took up a majority of the conversation, but how you place value, which parts you place value on. Is it, what they say they want to do versus what they're actually going to do? And we talked a lot about watches and cars, and holes. But I think that was the majority of it, was kind of where you're getting your data from and how you're using that data to educate the product, and marketing around it.
I'm Nabi Syed.
I'm Sean Collins.
And this is Numbers and Narratives. All right, Stefan, thanks so much for coming on today. Really appreciated it. Before we keep going, do you want to give a brief intro about yourself?
Yeah. So I come from a mechanical engineering background, started in the aerospace industry, at some big companies, and was really kind of disappointed in the pace of innovation. 20 years from flash to bang for product launches. And so I ended up working mostly at startups where you wear a lot of hats, mostly too many hats, and kind of, pivot around, work on different things every day. And that really kind of excited me about work and keeps me going. I spent the last 3 years building out and leading the product team at QuietKat. We made rugged off-road e-bikes for utility uses, hunters, outdoorsmen, fishermen, and just had a kid 5 months ago. And now I'm at a electrified stroller wagon startup, which seems like a good meshing of e-bike plus baby. Basically product manager for both companies, product leader. I just love wearing both of the engineering development hats, interfacing with customers equally as much as the development team, and kind of keeping that 30,000 foot business view in mind at all times to kind of, keep all three parties happy.
Yeah, I figured this would be a fun conversation because Sean and I spend a lot of time talking about how to, how to basically design around the user. Just this morning, he sent me a screenshot from our landing page and was like, hey, this is it was a little image thing that we have that is it's just badly formatted and terrible because we do everything we'll launch a test on our website and then we'll just completely forget about it and be like, oh crap, we should have changed that back because when we launched the test, we didn't actually think about design and it looks really ugly. And over time, our website is just kind of degraded. But we talk about this kind of stuff a lot. And Stefan, the conversation that you and I had for the blog I thought was really, really interesting is how you can, sort of create your product around the idea of listening to customers. You told me a bunch of stories about places you worked, installing sort of little I think IoT devices to figure out, hey, how are our customers using the product? What bugs are they facing? All this kind of stuff, and listening to how a customer listening basically to how a customer uses the product, using both quantitative and qualitative feedback to basically make sure that you're designing something that somebody is actually going to use in the real world. And it kind of encompasses a lot of the things that Sean and I talk about. One is retention, right? How do you get your customers to continue using your product? Two is user experience. How do you design something that's intuitive, easy to use, not difficult? And three, I guess two things. Never mind. I said three things. I don't remember what the third thing was, but two things. And I figured it would be really interesting to kind of sit down and have a discussion about that, figure out how you actually develop a smart product.
Well, I think the key is if you ask them what they want, they'll say something, and that's definitely valuable, but it's not you can't put all of your eggs in that basket, because if they say they need, 50 gigs of RAM, but they're only using 10, you're kind of you're baking more cost into the product than they actually need. And, I think that applies to everything. To your point, if you're making a shape box that has 15 different, shapes, and they can put all the shapes through one hole and achieve the same goal, you're you're going to have buyer's remorse because you spent $200 on your product that could have costed 15, and do all the things that you actually need.
Sticking a line with that analogy, like, what do you do in that case? Like, I'm going to stick with the analogy of I fear we're going to say holes a lot in this podcast, which, that's always a risk, but let's go with it. What do you do in that situation? If you're like washing the product and you see that, you've got 6 holes, but everyone can fit all the things through one hole. God damn it. Do you just delete the other ones? Okay, what's a better analogy? Like, because I'm going to burst out laughing every single time.
I'll go back to like when we talked about, which was e-bikes. And so if you, for instance, tire size, our customer thinks, generally speaking, that the fat tires are essential for off-road use. But then you look at like
wait, actually, before we dive into that, can you explain sort of the concept of outdoor bikes? Because when you told me this, I didn't actually realize this was the thing, and then I looked it up and I was like, wow, I really want one of these, even though I live in Manhattan.
Yeah. So I guess I'll the main product is for hunters. We're replacing like side-by-sides, ATVs, dirt bikes, allowing these hunters to go further into the backcountry, shoot an elk and drag it out, with a trailer. And it's silent because it's electric. It doesn't burn gas, so it doesn't smell, and your prey can't smell you coming. And you get more access to areas that are previously you can take a motorized vehicle to. So that's kind of the use case and how our niche. There's very few companies going after hunters as it relates to e-bikes. So yeah, that's kind of the demographic, the use case. I guess I brought up the pavement princess example where, you could have a customer who wants a 10-foot high Ford truck that has 30-inch tires, but really is just using it to go to the grocery store. So if you give them what they want, they won't be happy. If you give them what they want, they will be happy, but they're not necessarily using it for what it's designed to be used for. And I think that there's kind of a balance there. So the example for like QuietKats is if they say, oh, I go on 50-mile hunts 10 times a year and I need a battery that can do that. And you build it to do that. It costs, $500 more. You end up finding with firsthand data, like an IoT module, that they're going on 5-mile hunts every other year. What do? Do you give them a $500 more expensive battery that they're going to realize that they never use, or do you give them the battery that's actually for what they're doing? And I think you got to pick and choose those battles. There is some definite, like, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so some of it is like brand image. Some of it is, they have a certain image that they're going for as well. But yeah, I just think it's fascinating to see like what people are actually doing versus what they think they will do or what they ask for.
I mean, yeah, it's so much a positioning question. At least as a marketer, I see it as a positioning question. I recognize it's a lot of other types of questions too. But I mean, the truck example, people that need the tow package and they need all these things, and it's like, oh yeah, do you really do a lot of big hauls to Walmart or something, or what are we doing? Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I'm sure I have the same thing. I have like 2 different bikes for 2 different types, and one of them has almost no miles on it because I just got it because I really wanted it.
Well, I mean, I think there's also like selling, like overselling, but like if you oversell too much, like I bet you're kind of upset that you purchased that bike. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So like, I'm one thing I'm really curious about here is like a company that's selling that sort of like lifestyle, right? Like a good example of this is cars, right? Like everyone buys like a Jeep Wrangler or an F-150 or like a King Ranch, like Ram, right? Those gigantic trucks that have like millions of pounds of towing capacity. Like I think that's a really, really good example. They're all mostly pavement princesses, right? Like the number of people that are taking like a $60,000 Jeep Wrangler Rubicon onto like an off-road track is probably like less than 10% of their entire buyer market. I'm sure I can find this stat somewhere. Same thing with like a the Mercedes G-Wagon. Like it used to be like a professional like military vehicle, and they like turned it into those like Luxo barge for like Brad Pitt types. What do you do in that? Like I guess like those products still exist, and from a marketing standpoint, they're still selling. Like they still sell like hotcakes, right? Like people drop 250 grand on these things. Do you like what do you do from like a I guess a marketing perspective and a product perspective? Like do you take the risk of saying, okay, we're actually going to come up with two models. One of the models is going to be specific for the city, the pavement princesses, right? Like it's like the one that's like soft and like has soft seats and like is like meant for urban cruising. And you come up with one version for the people that actually want it, or do you just like intrinsically change various parts of just the hero product to appeal more towards people that what people are actually going to use it for? Like what do you do in that circumstance? Because they're clearly buying the lifestyle, right? They're clearly buying the idea of what they want to do. They're like, oh, like,
or the aspiration, like I want to be this person, so I'm going to have this gear.
This is such an interesting question because, like, both from like Sean, you're marketing, you're a marketing genius. Like Stefan, like you've run products and you've built products. Like, what do you do in this situation? Like, what's the right answer?
I think the price is really the driver. Like, if your target customer is the G-Wagon customer, then you build it to the nines, even if they're not going to use it, because the price isn't an issue. What we ran into was that our customers were extremely price sensitive. So you wanted to give them that image that they were getting the G-Wagon, but like had different brakes or like slightly less comfy seats, or, using that analogy. So it was, how much value can you cram into this using the G-Wagon as the goal, without buying a G-Wagon.
But I guess like for QuietKat where you used to work, like did you still have the G-Wagon style product, right? Like again, going back to cars, like Toyota doesn't actually sell that many Supras, but if I walk in to a Toyota dealership looking for like a $14,000 Yaris and I see like a Supra in the corner, maybe I'll buy my Yaris with like a sport pack. It's like, oh, they make that thing, man. They can make my Yaris go fast, so I'll spend an extra $5,000 on the sport pack.
Yeah, like the Halo product. Yeah, we definitely. So we have like a good, better, best range. The best was up to like $7,000, and the good was down to $3,000. So yeah, I definitely think you have to have something to get them in the door. And then you have something to aspire to, and then they land somewhere in the middle.
That's really interesting because I think, there's an interesting book called The Compass and Nail about Patagonia, which I think the outdoor industry is another place, just like, the bikes, just like cars, just like, I think you could look at watches like Rolex, right? Like the Rolex Submariner watch was a badass, innovative product for that allowed you to dive. People are not going scuba diving in their Rolex. There are now digital watches that have way more displays that people are doing, and this you wear your Submariner to show that you have money and are cool. So the Compass and Nail talks about Patagonia and how deliberate they've been in trying to stick to designing their products for their ideal customer, acknowledging that like the people who are getting it just out of aspiration or trying to identify as something will only want to do that if real badass outdoor people are using the products to do real badass outdoor things. And so then you can kind of like walk it back. Like it loses its identity piece if no one does it, or it takes on a new identity. Like the Rolex is no one even talks about it being a deep sea diving watch. It is just a style piece, right? Patagonia wanted to still be an outdoor place for climbing and hikers. And it gives an example. I can't remember if it's like Eddie Bauer or LL Bean or one of these like brands that you wouldn't think was really made for like hardcore outdoor stuff, apparently was truly founded for like Arctic adventures. And then people started wearing it to be cool and stylish, and they adjusted and kind of switched and moved up to just designing good looking gear. And they just got like dropped by every outdoorsman. And that made all the people who were just buying it for style, give up on it. And so they had to do like a multi-decade long kind of like turn around the brand kind of thing, because they lost track of like their North Star of who they were designing for. So
yeah, I think that was North Face was that example, because they just totally overhauled their entire brand image and went back to making extremely technical gear. And it turned the company around for sure.
It's really interesting you bring up Patagonia because I don't, and this might be a little bit apocryphal. I don't actually know. I think I'm like 90% sure Patagonia doesn't do this anymore, but like the Patagonia VC vest was very much a thing, like especially in like the finance guys wearing like
they like actively made a policy that they wouldn't sell corporate swag.
Yeah, they just were like, no, screw you. Like, we don't want this being worn by bankers like on Wall Street. We want this being worn. We want this like purpose built. We don't want to associate ourselves with this brand. And they like, I've actually, I can't think of another company that has like taken a brand position against a big part of their customer base, what I assume is a big part of their customer base, so hard. As that, but Patagonia is also just like a super interesting company. I wonder like what, I don't know, like does that like drastically impact their sales? It must, right?
I mean, it's called Patagucci too now, right? Like they're that's a great example of someone that's, they make technical gear for climbing and hiking, like you were saying, Sean, but I think 80% of their customers are like frat guys and VC dudes. And yeah, I mean, maybe that's something they're just, they're taking the sales, but they're pushing it aside behind the scenes, or I don't know.
All right, so back to you and what the things that Ibby and I have no idea how to do. You've got this product. You have like a very clear use case and like key customer that you were originally designing for. I guess how much testing and iteration goes like live into market before you do one of these big launches, and how much is it like, hey, we're going to start selling, we're going to build in all these monitors that you did to figure out what we need to adjust and how people are actually using it, and then you adjust on like wave 2 or release 2, or I guess how staggered is that?
Yeah, so for the QuietKat example, so I was brought on as the first technical hire. We were essentially, branding and somewhat customizing bikes, but they were not designed from the ground up with our customer in mind. So basically, we had a short amount of time, relatively speaking, for hardware product development to turn around this bike and make it 100% better, designed specifically for these customers. So we didn't really have the luxury of like crawl, walk, run in terms of, let's do a couple of things here. We basically just had 4 years of data that was what was selling well, what was not selling well, and what were our customers saying about our product in the field. So we didn't have like I said, we didn't have the luxury of testing physical product in the field other than during the development cycle. So we passed out tons of bikes to ambassadors, subject matter experts, key customers, B2B, main B2B contacts, and kind of were like, acid check, where are we at? And then, kind of using general surveys, we were able to figure out the main pain points and the low hanging fruit for, what, for instance, like if we asked what gets tired first when you're biking, is it your low back? Is it your wrists? That was driving geometry changes to the frame. What do you value most? Range, power, torque. What are you carrying? How much weight is this? Like a lot of product related questions drove the product for the launch. And again, it's a little bit of that. Oh, how much are you carrying? How much are you really carrying? And you want it to be able to tow your car, in the parking lot, but also not cost $6,000 and no one will buy it. So yeah, I guess it's a big value, and the bike is a giant combination of different components. So you have like, oh, I'm going to pull a little value out of this and add it to this, and speccing in the BOM so that you hit the right metrics on what people care about most on the value emphasis pieces.
I guess backing up from there, because I do think that using price and cost and value is always like such a fascinating exercise. Did you you went in knowing this is the price point that we think we can effectively sell this at. And so you do a backwards plan of, in order to achieve this much margin, we need to have this much. And, you're then forecasting like the bulk rates you'll get on any materials. Like if you sell this much, we can get it down here. And so every single design decision and product selection decision had to account for your margins and like how that plays into fitting within this price point.
Yeah. Especially on like the lower end. So in e-bikes right now, there was a really big race to the bottom driven by, anti-dumping, supply chain and massive inventory or over inventory situations. So if we made a conscious decision not to join that race to the bottom, but we did need to have a competitive product at the lower end of our premium brand. So we basically started with that. We're like, we cannot charge more than this amount, given a certain amount of, sales that we're bound to run. How much value can we cram into this thing? And then, like I said, good, better, best, kind of incrementally adding features to differentiate enough, but not drive the cost up too much.
Are you taking the same approach I know you must have just recently started because what new company's name, remind me, Ellavate?
Ellavate, yeah.
Ellavate, yeah. So for Ellavate, is it sort of the same approach? I don't know anything about stroller wagons, so I'm curious to see what the strategy.
We just launched Indiegogo in July. Pre-production, we have prototypes, and we're hoping to deliver late this year, early next year. But we're coming to market with one product. So yes, we're placing value on certain things, and there's a definite price ceiling that we have decided that we can't go above. But we don't have a good, better, best in terms of product mix. Obviously that's on the roadmap, and I think we're taking some time to learn more from product in the field before we fully bake out those offerings. But yeah, I think, finding out what customers care about and packing the most, features and dollars towards those features while still kind of ticking all the other boxes is 90% of my job.
That's kind of sweet. So, I mean, we talked a little bit about this with QuietKat, which is, you guys have sensors and devices that are on the bike that helped you understand, hey, how often are people using this? There's telemetry data coming through for the bike. And like, I used to run data science for Peloton. We did a lot of the same stuff. Like what is the content being downloaded, trying to understand and actually position the product, and figure out what it does. The question that I have is, what happens when you don't have a product already, right? Like, what do you do to shoehorn the exact same learnings?
Yeah.
Without something that has those devices in the field? Are you running lots of user testing? Like, I know you just started. So like, I more mean like in an ideal world, if you could do this, how would you do it?
The process is what you think, what they say, and then kind of that closing the loop is what they're actually doing. And I think for pre-production and startups, you don't necessarily get that, what they're actually doing. You can get some what they're actually doing, but you're picking the customer and you're giving them a sample and you're seeing like what they use, like whether just watching it. But it's not like that whole picture that you're looking for as a product manager to sort of like, oh, well, this customer at this end of the spectrum is doing this, but this one over here is doing something else. I think that what they actually do is a little bit of a luxury that some startups don't actually get. But yeah, what we did with what we're doing with Ellavate is picking ambassadors, picking people that have lots of family, lots of kids. They're using the product. They would be the would-be buyers of the product, and seeing, what they like. But that's, again, a little bit what they say, not necessarily what they do. Because they don't, we don't have that like, when no one's looking, what are you doing with it?
Yeah. And I suppose going back to what we talked about toward the beginning of this recording, Sean, like from a marketing perspective, I suppose it doesn't actually matter that much, right? Like if a customer says that they want this to be able to, they are like, listen, I'm running a marathon next year and I like want to take my kid on this marathon with me. And it has to be able to like survive like a 26-mile run. And the battery needs to be able to survive for that long. And it needs to be like relatively little effort for me to push because I'm still running a marathon. Like that person's not going to run a marathon. Like most of the people aren't going to run a marathon. But if you can sell the idea that you can do this, and this is the only product in the market that can do this, then as long as people believe that that is something that they might use it for someday, they'll do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a positioning question, right? On like, if you want to be known and try and take the spot on the four square grid of like, we are the most rugged with the most ability to do these things, then like you design or even if the features kind of suck and the wheels would fall off if you take this electric stroller off-roading or on a marathon, and it would everything would fall apart. You design it to look like it, and it would work, and all your marketing is people running with it and that kind of thing, right? If you're trying to say this is the most convenient thing, then there's no reason to build in product design stuff that's about being rugged. It's about all your ads are people with 2 bags of groceries and a kid dangling off of them, and you talk about, hey, try to do this with one more hand or something like that, or we all need a hand sometimes. Boom, there's your tagline. It's something like that where I think you have to understand what people are saying and how you're going to relate to that. And I do think that on the marketing side, what matters more is what people say, not what people actually do.
Yeah, I think, like we were a very heavily D2C brand. And so I worked pretty frequently with our e-com team, and we developed the surveys together. And I think there was definitely oh, wow, it can do that. Like when you're educating the marketing team, they grab onto certain things because they have, like you were saying, they're looking at like, oh, wow, people are saying all our competition is saying like, oh, this is the longest range on any e-bike. And then if I come in and say, yeah, we actually have the biggest battery, then they'll latch onto that. And then that becomes kind of like the back feedback loop to where they're looking, the marketing's driving the product's driving the marketing, and then a little veer. And then next thing you know, the marketing's changing the product spec so that we make claims or whatever. So I think it's potentially like a flywheel where it spirals out, but sometimes that brings in more customers too.
Stefan, like, are you guys being pre-production and having an Indiegogo campaign? Peloton also launched on Indiegogo, and I actually wasn't there early enough to know this, but do you do marketing for the product before it's been launched? Like, are you trying to find, like, for something like an Indiegogo campaign, how do you find supporters? Like, how do you drive hype to a project like that?
Yeah, I mean, so we were doing some paid advertising. I don't have the specifics of where that was being funneled. But honestly, like our founder lives in Newport, and the main customer for this is like, the family, the mom who has 2 kids and a cooler and an umbrella and is like hauling all of her gear across the beach with, like Sean said, 1 kid on her arm, 2 kids in the stroller. And yeah, it's the branding is mostly around effortless. So she would just go out to the beach and it would draw a lot of attention. Cause I think that was her target customer. She lives there. And yeah, people getting eyes on it. And we found it with e-bikes too, like seeing and feeling and testing it. They want it.
That's pretty sweet. I don't know anything about watches, but the Omega Speedmaster is a really cool thing because I like know that it was developed for the space program. Like when we were going to go to the moon, they developed the Speedmaster, and it was like, oh, like it was the same idea. It was like ridiculously over-engineered. They're like, oh crap, this automatic watch is not going to like work on the moon. We need to make something work on the moon. And the reason, like, I don't want to buy any other kind of watch, but like just because I know that, like that is so cool. I am probably never going to space. Like probably never going to be able to use the key feature, but I still want it for that reason because it's kind of sick.
I love that you said probably. First of all, let's all celebrate that you're still optimistic that NASA might hit you up at some point and be like, Ibby, an asteroid is coming and Ben Affleck is unavailable. We really need you.
Go save Matt Damon for the umpteenth time. Like super tangent, but there's this like article about how much it would have cost to save Matt Damon from all the things that movies have been developed of saving him from. Let me see if I can find it. How much to save Matt Damon? Oh yeah, it would cost $900 billion to rescue Matt Damon in all of his movies. Matt Damon has had a lot of unfortunate on-screen accidents that have stranded him in far-off locales. And between The Martian, Interstellar, Elysium, and Saving Private Ryan, he racks up a whopping $900 billion in real-life money.
He's worth saving, though.
Why have you not positioned Coursera as the best CX insights tool for space travel?
Honestly, this maybe answers my question because it's the CX person wants to use AI very badly, but not with anything related to space travel. Most likely, I don't think our target market is really primed for consumer space travel quite yet. But one day, I hope to land Virgin Galactic, which I don't think exists anymore, but Virgin Galactic CX team could use us.
We'll bring him back.
I'm interested in getting your marketing opinion on something. Again, this is a super tangent, but there's this YC company called Boom Supersonic, which is trying to basically bring back supersonic flight.
Yeah.
Calling your supersonic plane company Boom, I don't know. Like, I know it's around the sonic boom, but the first thing that like comes to mind is a plane exploding in my head. Is that good or bad marketing?
I mean, I think you are assuming a level of knowledge about supersonic travel and the effects of it that is not prevalent in actual society.
All right. So most people agree with you. Think that most people
agree with you. I don't think most people understand that when you eclipse the sound barrier, there is a renowned boom, and that is why supersonic travel was banned, because of what it did to, you know, the airports and the cities around it and the animal life and all that. So like, I think that they missed.
Okay. All right. Sweet. Good. I'm glad that people agree with me. This has been really good. We're sitting at 35 minutes. I think that's probably a good place to end. Before we jump off, though, Stefan, do you have anything that you want to pub? Like, if our listeners want to find you somewhere, where do they, outside of the Coursera blog that we wrote, that's quite, in my opinion, quite good, considering I wrote it. Where do our listeners find you, what you have to say, more teachings of Stefan?
Yeah, I mean, so elevatewagon.com is the landing page. That's, again, going to be the real site's going to be live shortly. And again, forecasting product to be shipping end of this year, early next year. Yeah, I'm wearing a lot of hats, doing a lot of things, and I'm looking for, I'm hoping to work for a couple companies, helping startups get off the ground and pre-production and or production phases. I think most of my experience has been with startups, and I love it's like an addiction, right? Where you're wearing 15 hats, you're supposed to be wearing one, and your job description has changed 3 times over the past 4 months, and you're talking to customers the same amount as you're doing development work. I'm addicted to it, fully addicted. So that's kind of where I've been working, and that's what I want to keep doing.
Definitely. I think both of us would agree with you on that. It is very fun, and sometimes I think I messed up in some way, but who cares? Thank you so much for coming on. Seriously, I'm really excited about, I don't have a kid, but I have a couple close friends that are having kids soon. The Elevate Wagon sounds really sweet. Excited to hear more about the journey and hopefully more conversations to come. But again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. This was awesome. Can't wait for you all to listen.
Yeah, everyone enjoy the show. Thank you.
Awesome. Great chatting with you.